The real story is a historical account of the convict leasing system in post-Civil War Alabama, focusing on the life and death of Green Cottonham. Huck Fuller's freedom at 22 was measured in steps. Each one he took down the red dirt road leading into Columbiana, the Shelby County seat, was a tiny act of defiance. He was not heading to a white landlord's field or to the back door of a merchant's shop. He was walking to meet Cora, his sister, who worked as a laundress for the county clerk's wife. She had a letter for him, Shed said, sent from a cousin in Birmingham speaking of work at a rail yard. A letter. A possibility. The late March sun of 1908 was warm on his neck, and for a moment the air didn't taste of dust and defeat. It tasted like hope, fragile as a dandelion puff. He passed the old Kirby plantation, its columns bleached white. Men who looked like him, bent double in the cotton stalks, were ghosts of his father, ghosts of his grandfather. That was the life he was walking away from. Sharecropping was a mathematical slavery. The more you picked, the deeper you sank. The ledger book in the planter's hand was a weapon. Huck had vowed to die before he let his name be entered in one again. Columbiana was sleepy, but its eyes were open. On the courthouse steps, Sheriff Tate sat whittling, his gaze a physical weight as Huck passed. Huck kept his eyes forward, his back straight. He had his papers, a tattered letter from a preacher affirming his character, folded carefully in his pocket. It was his shield. He found Cora behind the clerk's house, by the wash line. Her smile faltered as she pressed the Birmingham letter into his hand. "Don't linger, Huck," she whispered. "Get it read and get gone." He nodded, his heart thumping. He needed a quiet place. The train depot had a shaded bench. It was public, but a man waiting on a train had purpose. As he walked, he unfolded the cousin's scrawled message. Words leaped out, they hiring. Strong backs. Pay is... A shadow fell over. The paper. "Boy, what's your business?" Sheriff Tate stood over him, thumbs hooked in his belt. His deputy, a lean man named Riggs, flanked him. Huck stood slowly, careful, respectful. "Afternoon, Sheriff. No business, sir. Just reading my mail, waiting to see about the eastbound." Tate's eyes, pale and assessing, swept over Huck's clean but threadbare clothes. "You look idle to me. You employed?" "I'm seeking employment, sir. Got a lead right here in Birmingham." Huck offered the letter, a talisman. Tate didn't take it. "Seeking ain't having." "You got proof of current employment? A contract?" The shield was made of paper, the law was made of iron. "No, sir, not yet. But I'm on my way to..." "Vagrancy," Tate said, the word flat and final. "Can't have idle Negroes loitering at the depot. Disturbs the peace." Panic, cold and sharp, shot through Huck's veins. "I ain't loitering, Sheriff. I'm just reading." "I got my character paper." He fumbled in his pocket. Riggs stepped forward and grabbed his arm. "You can show it to the judge." The arrest was a blur of rough hands and cold metal. No one at the depot met his eyes. As they marched him to the jail, Tate spoke quietly to Riggs, words Huck caught, healthy, Tennessee coals quota. "Good price this month." The cell was a cage of stone and iron bars. Huck gripped the bars, the letter from Birmingham crumpled in his fist. His freedom hadn't been stolen on a dark road by men in hoods. It had been taken in broad daylight on a bench for the crime of hoping. The Columbiana courtroom the next morning was a transaction, not a trial. The air smelled of wood polish and gilt. Judge Foreman, a man with a waterfall of white mustache, presided like a bored shopkeeper. "Huck Fuller," the sheriff intoned, "charged with vagrancy and idle disorder." The judge peered down. "You employed, boy?" "Your Honor, I was seeking..." "Yes or no?" Huck's mouth was dust. "No, sir. Guilty. Fine of $25 or 6 months' labor for the county." $25 was a mountain. It was a year's saved profit from a good harvest that never came. Huck's voice cracked. "I can't pay, sir." "Then labor it is." The gavel fell. The entire exchange lasted 90 seconds. Back in the holding pen, a seasoned older man named Elijah, in for looking at a white woman, spat on the floor. "They ain't keepin' you for no county labor, son. You been sold." "Sold? Slavery's done." Elijah's laugh was a dry cough. "They just changed the receipt. You hear that wagon?" A rattle of chains and a diesel engine groan sounded outside. Men were herded out, shackled at the ankles into a chain gang. Huck's irons were clamped on, the cold weight and unforgiving truth. They were loaded into a barred wagon like livestock. Through the slats, Huck saw Columbiana disappear. He saw Cora running toward the square, her face a mask of horror, stopping as the wagon pulled away. Her silent scream was the last piece of his old life. The journey was a descent into hell's antechamber. They arrived at Pratt Mines near Birmingham. The sky was blotted out by a permanent haze of coal smoke. The air thrummed with the pounding of hammers and the shriek of trains. They were paraded before a man in a crisp suit, Mr. Dobbs, the mine captain for Tennessee Coal, Iron and Railroad, a U.S. Steel property. Dobbs walked the line, a ledger in his hand. "You are not employees. You are convict labor. Your sentence is property of the state, leased to this company. You work, you eat. You don't, you get the strap. You try to run, you get the bullet. Your numbers are your names." He stopped before Huck. "Strong back. Good." He nodded to a guard, put him in Red Gate crew. They were stripped, hosed down with icy water, and issued course-numbered uniforms. Huck became 47th. The chaining point moved from ankle to sole. That night, in a barracks that stank of sweat and despair, Elijah whispered in the dark, "The trick ain't to fight the mountain, boy. The trick is to outlast it. They count on you breaking. Don't give 'em the satisfaction." But as Huck stared at the rusted roof, feeling the mine deep, rhythmic shudder beneath him, he wondered what satisfaction was left for a man who was no longer a man, but a number with a price tag. The cage dropped with a terrifying lurch, plunging Huck and 20 others into the earth. The world of sun and air was severed. What remained was a perpetual oppressive night, broken only by the flickering oil lamps on their caps. The Pratt mine was a living tomb. The tunnel's drifts were narrow, the ceilings low, forcing men to crouch or crawl. The air was thick, hot, and laden with coal dust that coated the tongue, gritted between teeth, and burned in the lungs with every breath. The constant, rhythmic sounds were of picks striking rock, of shovels scraping, of grunts and coughs. Huck's crew was driven by a guard named Bull, a mountain of a man with a voice like grating stone. "Move, 47. That coal ain't gonna dig itself." "You think this is a picnic?" The labor was ceaseless. Load, haul, shore up, dig deeper. The dust was so dense the lamplight only reached a few feet, creating a world of shifting shadows and disembodied sounds. Huck saw men, older and weaker, falter. A man they called Old Ben simply sat down, his breath a wet, ragged wheeze. Bull was on him in seconds. "On your feet, worm." Can't breathe, boss," Ben gasped. The whip cracked once, a sound that echoed sharper than any pick strike. Ben cried out, struggled up, and fell back to shoveling, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on his face. At the end of the first 12-hour shift, Huck's muscles screamed, and his lungs felt packed with mud. They were herded to the surface, blinking like moles in the fading light, and fed a lump of cornbread, a scoop of thin, greasy beans. It was fuel, not food, just enough to keep the machine running. In the barracks, men collapsed onto rough bunks. Huck's hands were blistered and bleeding. Elijah, across from him, coughed a deep, rattling sound that didn't stop. "The dust," he finally said, wiping his mouth. "It gets in you, becomes part of you. Some men, it fills 'em up till there ain't no room left for air." Huck saw it everywhere. The constant hacking miner's cough, the way men's shoulders hunched not just from labor, but from the weight of the mountain above them. One day, a section of timber shoring gave way with a groan and a crash further down the drift. The shouts were not of rescue, but of annoyance. Production halted for an hour while they cleared the debris and 2 broken bodies. Dobbs walked by, noting in his ledger, "Cost of doing business," he muttered to Bull. That night, chained to his bunk, Huck had a dream of the red dirt road to Columbiana. He was walking, but his feet were heavy, shackled not with iron but with the very earth itself. He was not walking toward hope, but into the ground. He woke with a start, Elijah's coughing the only sound in the dark. The darkness wasn't just around him. It was inside, growing. Weeks blurred into a timeless agony. Huck's body hardened, but his spirit frayed. He learned the rhythms of survival: keep your head down, meet your quota, avoid Bull's eye. He clung to Elijah's wisdom like a rope, but the rope was fraying too. Elijah's cough worsened, becoming a constant wet torment. He began to lose weight, his robust frame turning gaunt. One morning he couldn't rise from his bunk. Bull stormed in. "Get up, 12. Shift starting." Elijah tried, but collapsed back, his breath a terrible, bubbling gasp. "Sick, Captain. I'm sick." Bull's lip curled. "Ain't no sick days here." He unfurled his whip. The first lash made Elijah jerk. The second drew a weak cry. Huck, without thinking, stepped between them. "Hes dying, can't you see that?" The world exploded in white pain as Bull's fist connected with Huck's jaw. He hit the floor, tasting blood. Bull stood over him, boot raised. "Disobedience. Interfering with discipline. That's 2 more months on your sentence, 47. He turned to 2 other guards. "Drag 12 to the hole, maybe the dark'll." Remind him what his job is. The hole was a pitch-black, flooded punishment pit. Elijah, half-conscious, was dragged away. He never came back. They said pneumonia took him in the night. His bunk was empty, his number reassigned within the week. Elijah's absence was a colder chill than any in the mine. The last bit of warmth, of humanity, had been extinguished. A cold fury settled in Huck's chest, hardening alongside the coal dust in his lungs. He stopped dreaming of the road. He started watching. He watched the coal carts on their tracks, the patterns of the guards, the moments when the floodlights by the fence shorted in the rain. His chance came during a violent spring thunderstorm. The wind howled, rain fell in sheets, and the lights along the western fence sputtered and died. In the chaos of the shift change and the storm's roar, Huck saw a gap in the sentry patrol. It was a sliver of darkness, a breath of unseen air. He didn't think of the added months, the bullet, the dogs. He thought of Elijah's voice. Don't give him the satisfaction. To die, crawling in the mud for a taste of free air, was better than dying as 47 in the dark. With a surge of desperate strength, he broke from the line and sprinted into the void between 2 barracks, toward the broken fence line. For 3 glorious seconds he was just Huck, running. Then a shout cut through the rain. A spotlight swung, blinding him. A rifle shot cracked the sky, not aiming to hit but to warn. He stumbled, fell into the sucking mud, and strong hands were on him, dragging him back. Bull's face was a mask of pure triumph. "Thought you could fly, bird." The beating that followed was meticulous, brutal. Huck's world narrowed to pain. Later in the infirmary, a filthy cot in a tool shed, he floated in and out of consciousness. The mine doctor, a harried man who smelled of whiskey, poked at his ribs. "Cracked. Some fever, too. Lungs sound bad." He scribbled on a pad. Dobbs looked at the note, then at Huck's broken form. "Can he work?" "Not for a week. Maybe 2. Dobbs sighed, consulting his ledger. A week's lost production, plus medical. Unprofitable. His gaze on Huck was that of a man assessing a damaged plow. Mark him for transfer to the furnace crew at Ensley when he can stand. Harder work, shorter lifespan, but they'll take him off our books. The decision was made. Huck was not a man to be healed, but a depreciating asset to be moved. The Ensley Iron Works made the mine look like a sanctuary. Here the heat was a physical force, a beast that lived in the roaring blast furnaces. The air shimmered with it, smelling of molten metal, sulfur, and scorched lungs. Convicts fed the great beast shoveling coke, hauling pig iron, working close enough to the open furnace mouths that their eyebrows singed. Huck's broken ribs never properly healed. They ached with every labored breath. The coal dust in his lungs, now mixed with furnace soot, turned his cough into something ragged and vicious. He was a ghost, moving on instinct. The cold fury inside him burned down to embers. He was 47, but he was also 61 at Ensley, and soon he was no one at all. The fever the doctor had noted took root. It waxed and waned, but never left. In the inferno of the furnace floor he would be racked with chills. In the dank, cold barracks at night he burned up. He ate less and less. The world became a watery, distant place. One morning he simply could not rise. The guard, a different man, less cruel but equally indifferent, kicked his bunk. Up. Huck tried to speak, but only a wet rattle came out. The guard leaned closer, saw the sweat glistening on ashen skin, the hollow eyes. He sighed. Another one. He called for help. Huck was carried not to the tool shed, but to a small, isolated shack on the edge of the camp, the dying room. They laid him on a stained pallet. There was no doctor here, no pretense of care. This was where you were put so your dying wouldn't disturb the living. Time dissolved. He drifted, thinking of Cora's face at the wash line, of the feel of sun on red dirt, of the taste of cool water from the well. He thought of Elijah's cough. His own breathing now sounded just like it, a struggle, a losing battle for air in a world that had priced it too high. A young trustee, a convict assigned to clean the shack, brought a dipper of water to his lips. Huck's eyes focused for a moment. The boy looked scared. You got a name, mister?" the boy whispered. Huck's lips moved. It wasn't 47th. It wasn't 61st. It was the name his mama gave him, the one that belonged to the man on the road. "Huck," he breathed, the word a faint sigh. "Huck Fuller." He didn't see the boy nod. He didn't feel the last chill. His world narrowed to a pinpoint of memory, a stretch of Alabama road in spring, green and endless, walking toward a future that was never his. And then, nothing. The shack was silent. The trustee closed Huck's eyes. The camp captain was notified, the ledger updated. 61st, cause, pneumonia. Disposition, county burial. There was no hearse, no ceremony. 2 convicts on burial detail loaded his wrapped body onto a wagon already holding 2 others. They were taken to a scrubland field on the outskirts of Birmingham, dotted with small, unmarked mounds. They dug a new hole, shallow but long enough. Huck Fuller was lowered into Alabama earth. No marker was placed. The rain that night would smooth the dirt, erasing the very fact of the grave. In Columbiana, Cora felt a sudden, inexplicable emptiness while hanging sheets on the line. She looked north, toward the constant smoke haze on the horizon where Birmingham lay, and her hands began to shake. She never received a letter, a notice, a bone, or a button. For Cora, for history, Huck Fuller simply vanished into thin air, a debt paid in full to a system that had never seen his humanity. The system did not die with Huck. Convict leasing fueled Alabama's industrial ascent for 2 more decades. U.S. Steel's profits soared. Birmingham called itself the Magic City, its magic. Conjured from the suffering of thousands of 47ths and 61sts, the ledgers in county courthouses and corporate offices filled with columns of numbers, arrests, leases, deaths, all translating into revenue. It was not until 1928, after decades of exposés by brave journalists and mounting scandal over the sheer visible brutality, that Alabama officially abolished convict leasing. But the chains morphed. Chain gangs building roads, prison farms picking cotton, the essence of the system, the exploitation of black bodies for state and corporate profit, persisted under new legal guises. Huck's story was one ledger entry among tens of thousands, a statistic of greed. But a story is a different kind of ledger. It does not record profit and loss. It records weight, the weight of a name, the weight of a hope, the weight of a stolen life. The unmarked field where he lies is now likely paved over, part of a highway or an industrial park. The physical evidence is erased, but the truth is not in the ground. It is in the silence that followed him, in the generational poverty and trauma that system engineered, in the long shadow it casts over the meaning of justice in America. Green Cottenham was real. Huck Fuller in this tale carries his truth. They were not exceptions. They were the product of a deliberate calculation. Their stories force us to ask, when does freedom truly begin? Is it with a proclamation, or with the power to walk down a road unmolested, to breathe air that doesn't belong to a company, to have a name that cannot be replaced by a number? Remembering Huck is not an act of dwelling in past horror. It is an act of excavation. We must dig up these stories, these ledgers of bones, and hold them to the light. For in remembering the price he paid, we reckon with the true cost of the world we inherited, and we are challenged to build one where the air, and the freedom to breathe it, is truly free. This has been The Price of Air, a story based on the brutal reality of the Convict leasing system. If this history matters to you, if you believe these stories must be told, then please share this video to spread awareness. And subscribe to Tales of Slavery for more stories that uncover the hidden chapters of history. We are the keepers of these memories. Your support ensures they are never forgotten.